We're now going to demonstrate how to create a line graph in Excel, and to do that, this template that we're looking at is already set up for cost volume profit analysis. At the top of the template we have some information that reviews the basics of cost volume profit analysis and how to solve for break-even point both in terms of sales quantity and sales dollars. And so you'll want to review that to make sure you remember how cost volume profit analysis works. Let's go down now, and in the data input grid we're going to assume a selling price of $10 a unit, a variable cost of $6 a unit, and total fixed costs of $2,000. And notice that the grid has already been pre-formatted for currency. In Table 1 we're going to solve for the basic components that we need in cost volume profit analysis. So we'll begin by defining the break-even sales volume as being equal to, and if you need to review that, here's the formula. The break-even quantity is fixed cost divided by contribution margin. So we're going to click on fixed costs and divide that by contribution margin per unit, which is defined as selling price minus variable costs per unit. So our break-even sales volume is 500 units. The contribution margin percentage is equal to selling price per unit minus variable cost per unit divided by selling price per unit, and we're going to need parentheses around the numerator. So our contribution margin percentage is 40%, and the break-even sales point in dollars is equal to fixed cost divided by the contribution margin percentage. So our break-even sales dollars are $5,000, and that makes sense because that's the break-even sales volume of 500 times the selling price per unit of $10 a unit. Alright, now let's come down and we're going to fill in the data in Table 2 that's going to be used to create the line graph. So for quantity, we're going to input a range of sales quantities in 50 unit increments, and having begun that series we can now highlight the series and then use the fill handle, and Excel will complete the series in 50 unit increments. Okay, for total sales dollars, that's going to be equal to our sales quantity times the selling price per unit. So we'll come up here and click on the selling price per unit in the input grid, and we can anchor that by hitting F4, and that will anchor cell B24. And the reason it's helpful to anchor that is that we can now take that formula and simply copy it down. It will adjust the quantity but leave the sales price at cell B24. And likewise for total variable costs, that's going to be equal to the quantity times the variable cost per unit. And let's copy that down. Okay, our total fixed cost by definition does not vary with changes in sales quantity, so that's just going to be equal to $2,000 all the way down. So having anchored that, we can just copy that down. And finally, our total costs are going to be equal to the total variable costs, which is in column D, plus the total fixed costs, which are in column E. And then once again we can copy that down. So now we have the data that we need to create the line graph. Before we insert the graph, let's highlight the data that we're going to use to create that graph, and we're going to include the column headings as well as all the data in Table 2. And now we'll come up to the menu bar and click on the Insert tab and select Line, and we're just going to pick a simple two-dimensional line graph. Okay, and you can see that Excel will then take a guess at how we want to plot that data. Now we want to make some changes because right now our horizontal axis is just a series 1 through 21, and in fact what we really want along the horizontal axis is the quantity. So to modify the data, if we right click on the graph and we click on Select Data, we want to edit the horizontal axis. So I'm going to click on Edit, and if I click on the little icon here that allows me to select the range, I can then come down and just highlight the data in the quantity column of the table, and that's what we actually want to use for our horizontal axis. And then I'll click on the little chart icon again and say OK. And now you can see that the horizontal axis does in fact have the quantity from 0 to 1000 with little hash marks there for the 50 unit increments. Okay, now let's come over to the legend entries. So we're going to take quantity now out of the graph, so we're going to remove that. And now we're left with a plot of sales, variable costs, fixed costs, and total costs. If you wanted to edit any one of these, you could just click on it, click on Edit. And so let's suppose for series name, instead of saying FC, we want to actually type out fixed costs, and we'll say OK. And you can see on the graph that it changes. Alright, so let's click OK. So now the data looks good. It looks like we're plotting dollars against quantity. We have the fixed costs in there at 2,000. We have our total variable cost line, the green line, going up with a slope of 6, which is the variable cost per unit. We have the total sales dollar being plotted, the red line, and we have the total fixed cost, the sum of variable costs and fixed costs, and of course the point where total costs intersect with total revenue or total sales dollars, that is in fact our break-even point. The last remaining thing we could do here is to put some labels on the graph. So to do that, we're going to come up to our chart tools and click on Layout, and let's put a chart title in, and we can position that either an overlay. I'm going to put it above the chart. So I'm going to call this Cost Volume Profit Chart, and hit enter, and then it appears. And let's also label the axes. So we're going to label the primary horizontal axis. I'm going to put the title below the axis, and we'll just put sales quantity. And then for the vertical axis, I'm going to put that, I guess we'll try it as a vertical title, and type dollars. And you can expand the size of your graph, you can reposition it on the page, and you have a pretty nice looking graph.